And to order. Can we do a roll call, please?
Chair Rowich. Absent. Vice Chair Hughes.
Here.
Member Cherry. Absent. Member Marbury.
Here.
Member Reuter. Here. Member Roth.
Here.
Member Garcia. Absent so far. We have Ian for the city of Prescott and Roger McCormick for Yavapai County.
Yep.
Have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, and Title VI policy.
CYMPO complies with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and related non-discrimination statutes and regulations in all programs and activities. Members of the public may review the CYMPO Title VI plan and submit a self-identification survey by accessing the CYMPO website.
Thank you so much. Move on to item 3, call to the public. This item is provided an opportunity to presentation and comments by the public or subjects not on the agenda. Please complete a request for public input card and submit it to CYMPO staff prior to beginning of the meeting. When recognized, use the podium with a microphone and state your name. Speak time may be limited and discretion of the chair. Do we have any? Nope. All right. So seeing we have no public comment, we're going to move on to item 4. Item 4, consideration and possible action to approve the March 13th, 2024 regular meeting minutes of the Technical Advisory Committee.
I move to approve.
All right, second.
Well, second.
All right. Motion been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. All right. We don't have Kevin on here at the moment. We're gonna move.
We do have Jane from BDOT now.
Real, okay. So I'm gonna take item 13 and move it up to item 5. We'll give Kevin some more time. He's in another meeting at the moment. We're gonna jump to 13 just for this presentation and we'll go from there. So item 13, State Highway Rail Grade Crossing Action Plan. Miss Heidi Yopik, how we doing today?
This is Jane.
Oh, Jane. Sorry, wrong name on here.
Bruce.
So Heidi will start and then I will share the presentation. Can you see the presentation on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Is Heidi on?
I do see Heidi on.
Oh, she's on. She just got on.
Heidi?
Heidi, we're ready to go. Presentation's up.
No audio. Let's take it. I guess.
But it's not.
It's probably after a time.
She has my professional.
Okay. Looks like she's not having a microphone or the capability of it.
Okay, in that case, I'll cover her part.
Perfect.
So, hello, everyone. This presentation is designed to provide the information about Arizona's recently completed State Highway Rail Grade Crossing Action Plan. It's abbreviated as SHRAP. The most recent SHRAP was completed in February. So you may wonder, so what is a SHRAP? So it's a plan for how to improve the safety at approximately 700 public at-grade rail crossings in Arizona. So it was developed because safety is always the top priority for ADOT, especially related to railroad activities. And the plan is designed to bring about effective safety improvements, provides recommendations regarding programming, and help us to determine the annual budgets for projects. And it is also a federal requirement, and it must be updated every 5 years. And it covers safety at all the public at-grade crossings in Arizona. The goal of the SHRAP is to improve safety at public at-grade crossings for all modes of transportation that interact with trains. The objectives are measurable safety items to reduce the number and rate of incidents at crossings with active and passive treatments, reduce the number and rate of crossings incidents for all modes of travel, reduce the number and rate of incidents involving trespassers on the tracks. And I'll get into explaining about the trespassers a little bit more in a little bit. And it will reduce the severity of incidents at locations with reoccurring incidents. So to complete the most recent SHRAP, we followed the following scope items and were completed. We collected and analyzed available crossing data for all the crossings throughout the state. After analyzing the data, we identified trends at the high-risk crossings. We presented our findings, coordinated with interested stakeholders, and then prioritized the crossings. And we made recommendations for improvement, and then we compiled all of these into methodologies, findings, recommendation into an action plan document. And the SHRAP was funded by the ADOT Multimodal Planning Division, MPD of ADOT. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the pedestrian safety at railroad crossings, and this is where the trespassing comes in. So pedestrians are trespassing, and they pose a safety risk if they walk along the tracks, cross the railroad tracks anywhere other than a designated crossing point, cross a railroad track when the gate arms are down, they go under or around those gate arms. And these situations present a safety hazard as trains are huge and they're really heavy and they take a very long distance and time to stop. And the trains can't stop in time if there are pedestrians on the tracks. And during the 4 years of the SHRAP, there were 14 pedestrian fatalities, and they all were related to trespassing on the tracks. And so just in the last 2 years, there's been an additional 14 pedestrian fatalities related to trains in Arizona. And just in the last 6 months, there's been 4. So the FRA is the Federal Railroad Administration. They oversee railroads in the US. And they are concerned, and they're recommending and encouraging states to increase awareness and do safety improvements for pedestrians at crossings. So all across the US, there has been an increase in pedestrian fatalities at the railroad crossings. So it is a high concern for everyone. So this brings us to ADOT Utility and Railroad Engineering. So we are the liaison between ADOT and the railroad companies. In Arizona, we have 2 major railroads. These are class 1. They go all across the US. The trains are really long, and they're now over 2 miles long. And then we have 12 short line railroads. These are the local rail lines. We have 12 in Arizona, 8 are active, and there's 2 excursion railroads within that 8 count. And then we have 4 that are inactive. We do manage the statewide railroad crossing inventory, which is a requirement, and it accounts for all 700 crossings in the state. We also manage the Federal Highway Railroad Grade Crossing Safety Program. This is Section 130. You may have heard of it. So what the Section 130 is, it's a funding program to provide federal money for projects to improve safety at railroad crossings. It came about from the Highway Safety Act of 1973. And during that time, there was a lot of concern from the federal government about the high number of accidents occurring at all railroad crossings. So the nationwide funding program was established. So each state has their own Section 130 program that they oversee. So the overall goal of Section 130 program is to increase safety for all modes of transportation, including pedestrians. Typical Section 130 project can install a concrete surface. So this is replaces the old timber, gravel, dirt, some are old asphalt. There's even some that are old rubber. And it a project can install train activated the flashing lights and gates, or include the pedestrian gates. And related to that upgrade, we can install the sidewalks and signs and striping as long as it's related to the crossing upgrade. And a project can install in a more complex signal warning system, and a project could close the crossing. So Section 130 projects are selected and managed by utility railroad engineering. So the SRAP has been extremely valuable because we ranked each of those crossings and gave them a risk scoring. And this helps us to determine future projects. So utility railroad, we're responsible for the oversight, coordination, and completion of all aspects of the Section 130 projects. So that includes the clearances for every federal project. You have to do environmental, right-of-way, and utility clearances, and agreements between ADOT and the railroad, and between ADOT and the local agency, which is the intergovernmental agreement. And we make sure the funding is in place for the project, and also we represent the local agency, the railroad, and the project for a hearing. So an ACC hearing. So in Arizona, ACC oversees utilities, including railroads. So we have to go to a hearing to get approval to do any changes to that crossing. So we do that and we take care of that. So this is an example of a Section 130 project. So this one's 35th Avenue and Harrison Street in Phoenix. So the railroad does their own construction work. So they installed gates, cantilevers, and flashing lights. And the city of Phoenix did the civil work. So they installed the concrete center medians, which allowed for an additional gate arm to be installed and the railroad did it. But they did that concrete, they did the sidewalks, the ramps, they did the signs and the striping. Typical duration of this project like this is 3 years. If it's more complicated, it can go longer. And the cost is just over $1 million. Another example, this was Navajo Boulevard, State Route 77 Holbrook. This is a nice picture of what the concrete panels look like on that concrete surface. So in this crossing, the surface was failing and they did not think it was going to last through the winter. And this is the only crossing for about 180 miles. So they needed to close the road for 3 days. So extensive notification coordination, and we were able to complete the project in 6 months, a cost of just over $1 million. Very successful project. So this shows the Central Yavapai Metropolitan Planning Organization's map. And we have one project, one crossing in your boundary. And we just completed a Section 130 project here. And I have some photos. This is Verde Ranch Road, which is east of Pullman. So this is what the crossing looked like before. It was gravel surface, very narrow, and the surface was old timber. And so also this back a little bit shows how narrow it is. You couldn't even get 2 lanes to go through together. And so the cattle guards were very narrow too. So we work closely with Yavapai County and BNSF Railway. And there is 2 tracks here. So first the BNSF Railway came in. They installed the concrete surface, and then the county followed up afterwards. And they widened the road to 2 lanes, so 1 lane in each direction. They did asphalt surface, they did the signing and the striping. And this shows a little bit farther out, they replaced the cattle guards with wider cattle guards. So this crossing has a lot of truck traffic. The road leads to that Upper Verde River wildlife area. So it really did improve the safety of the crossing. And the county was extremely helpful and really good to work with. Excellent project. And so this was just completed in about April, so just a few months ago. So in closing, as you travel throughout the state and beyond, be safe out there. If you have any questions about the SRAP, ADOT Utility Railroad, Section 130 program, please feel free to contact any of us. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Any questions from anybody? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Kevin has, okay, so we're gonna come back to item 5 for an update from Rural Transportation Accuracy Council. Update from Kevin Adams. Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, everyone. We look like we're real close to the end as far as the legislative session is concerned. We are hearing that the governor and legislative leadership have come to a agreement on a basic blueprint for the budget for next year. I believe that we could see those budget bills introduced as early as this afternoon. We don't have the details on specifically what will be included. We do know that there is about a 650 million deficit for the current year that they're going to have to address. Roughly about the same amount of a projected deficit for next year. And so we're looking at probably at least 1.3 billion in adjustments that they're going to need to make. So that is problematic as far as increasing transportation funding. We don't have surpluses. You know, we had some historical surplus levels the last couple of years, and we were very fortunate in that much of those available one-time revenues were directed to transportation. We are not going to see anything like that this year. They're going to have to make cuts. The good news, I think, is that unlike previous deficit years, I don't think they'll be targeting transportation to balance the budget. In other words, I don't think they'll be taking HERF revenue and redirecting it to the general fund to help balance the budget. Now, I don't have any guarantees there. Hopefully, we'll see sort of what the proposal is at any minute now. So I don't see any gains, but I don't see any significant losses under this deficit scenario. The other big issue is the continuation of ADOT. I fully anticipate that that will be part of the overall budget agreement, at least part of the agreement on everything that needs to occur before they adjourn for the year. ADOT was subject to a sunset review this year. That requires legislation to be enacted to continue the agency further. Right now, their authority ends at the end of June, so we're literally just a couple of weeks away. I think everybody at the Capitol understands we can't have ADOT simply go away. You know, there's still a lot of debate over the length of the continuation, as well as whether there would be any mandates or restrictions placed on ADOT operations. I think that there probably will be some level of compromise. The typical duration is 8 years. I wouldn't be surprised if that is reduced some. As far as any restrictions on ADOT operations, I think there'll be less likely to be compromises there. If there are any such restrictions included, I imagine they'll probably not be ones that would jeopardize ADOT's ability to maximize the level of federal funding that we're able to bring back for transportation. So that's essentially where we are. And I'm hoping to get a lot of additional information very, very soon if anybody has any questions.
Anybody have any questions? All right, Kevin, you got off easy on that one, bud.
All right.
Thank you so much for the update on that. Appreciate that. Anything else you'd like to add, or?
No, I understand you're going to have a discussion about the priority project legislation for next year. I can stay on the call for a little bit longer if you want me to touch on that now, give you a little bit of background, happy to do so, or if you want to wait for later in the agenda, I can do that also.
Okay. Let's, yeah, let's let you talk.
Sure. Okay. Well, we had some pretty successful years there. Again, when there were some very historically high surplus levels to work with, there was about 650 million that was directed to infrastructure projects last year, and there was $1 billion 2 years ago. So unfortunately, like I indicated, we don't see available revenues for that this year. We did introduce our rural priority project legislation, and because there's no available funding, we're not overly confident that we'll see any additional projects funded this year. But you never know what the out or how the revenue situation is going to change over the next 12 months or so. And if revenue were to become available, it's not like we can just snap our fingers and immediately have a list of projects that should be at the forefront as far as being funded. So I think there's a lot of merit to going through this sort of 6-month process of developing priorities from rural areas that if money is available, we can quickly point that out to legislators that here's where that funding should go if it is available. I think another value with doing this legislation, even if the likelihood of revenues being available is not high, is that I think it's elevated the infrastructure as far as being a priority. I think that it's real prominent in lawmakers' minds. I think they also understand better the impacts of underinvestment and the impacts of not having all of these badly needed projects funded and constructed. And so, kind of what I was talking about before, I think it really has had an impact on them more than likely staying away from rating transportation funding to help balance the budget. They recognize and don't want to fall even further behind. So I think there's a lot of value to pushing this type of legislation, even if there's not a strong likelihood of revenue being available. So the RTAC board has taken the position that we will reintroduce the bill next year. We're starting from the default position of we'll just go ahead and include all the projects that were in last year's bill. In doing so, we recognize that with inflation as it is, if we had a $12 million project in the bill this year, we might not be able to deliver that project for 12 million next year. In all likelihood, it's going to go up in cost. And so we decided to basically increase this year's bill by 20%. And so it's just sort of a blanket increase. All the projects that are in there, that's kind of the default position, is their amounts will be increased by 20%. However, we are giving every COG and MPO an opportunity to make any adjustments they would like. If they want to remove projects, add new ones, modify the existing ones that are in there, we are very open to that being a part of next year's bill. The only deadlines that I think are important are, one, if you want changes included in the discussion and in the materials that are handed out to legislators at the Rural Transportation Summit in October, we need to get any adjustments by September 16th. So that would include a modified or new fact sheet if it's a new project that in the format that we have for the project booklet. So first deadline, if you want any adjustments, new projects discussed at the summit, Please get the new specifics on those projects in by September 16th. After that, we will more than likely, after that, we will more than likely introduce the bill no later than early January, possibly in December. And so if you do make adjustments and that we didn't quite have time to get it into the information for the summit, if you can get it to me by December, we can at least have those adjustments made in the introduced version of the bill that will be dropping for next year. So I guess that's the background. If anybody has any questions.
Right, hang tight there. We're gonna go to 6 now that you gave us the brief on that, and we'll let Mike talk, and then if you have any, we'll kind of joint that, if that's okay with you, Kevin.
Sure.
Okay, so we're moving on to 6, review, discussion, possible action to recommend approval of the projects to be prioritized in the 2025 RTAC pursuit of state legislative funding. Michael Lamar.
Sure, John. Talking to Vinny, the recommendation from staff is that we pursue the funding request that we had for 2024 with one fairly significant change. But it goes to the existing project list. It's basically to make priority number 1 a design concept for the State Road 89, Road 3 North to Road 5 North project. I think Vinny's thought process on that was understanding the scope and project cost and what this is going to look like. With the fact it's taken a few years to get this funding, is probably something worth investing in. The expectation is a project cost for something like a design scope would be about $330,000. So that's a new project that is now priority project number 1, and then everything else just shifts down 1. The difference in the ask is $330,000 is reduced off of project number 4 to make up for the $330,000 for priority.
Okay. All right, any questions? Yes, Frank.
Comment I'll say on that, I'm in full support of this from Chino Valley's point of view, because actually when we first started looking this, I think, Brent, it was when you were here the previous time, back in 18, if I remember right, we applied for a build grant. So just getting enough design in there to lock down the price estimates, I think is going to go a long way into being confident in how we would request funds for this project. I think it's a good idea.
I agree. Anybody else? All right. May we get a motion on that? All right. Yeah,
You hit it and I'll make a motion.
all right.
Make a motion to recommend the executive board to approve the 2025 CYMPO and RTAC priority projects as presented.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Vice carried. All right. Kevin, you have anything else you want to add, or are we good?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure, because I haven't seen this chart before, and I see the total at the bottom is 33.6 million, which was the amount that was allocated to CYMPO last year. That doesn't include the 20 million inflation adjustment, which brings your total up to about 40.3 million. And I don't know if staff is going to address that later on, that additional
Kevin,
7 million or so.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that, yeah, there's about another 7 million that's been provided to CYMPO for next year's bill.
I think Vinny's expectation was that a 20% inflationary adjustment would be added to 2 and 3, and then again, any additional differential would have to be made off of.
Okay. So we want
We need a motion to
to
add
adjust that,
addition?
or yeah,
What do you
just
think?
amend your motion to,
Yeah, however it works for whoever makes the minutes. I'll amend my motion or make a new motion if we need
Include
to,
the 20%.
to have, CYMPO staff include the 20% inflation factor recommended by Kevin, and then include that in the recommendation to the executive board.
Second.
All right, it's been a seconded act with the amendment, so
Sorry, maybe a
Duly
few
noted.
extra words.
it's okay. No, it's good.
You sounded very much like an elected official.
He was thinking it through.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, the only other thing I would add is that because the majority of your projects are on the state highway system, that I would ask that CYMPO coordinate with the ADOT, probably the district office be most appropriate to make sure that the scope of the project and the appropriation amount we're pursuing is realistic from ADOT's perspective.
Okay, thank you for that info, Kevin. All right.
To revote on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, so once we did the amended motion and it was seconded, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. The ayes carried. Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 7. Review and discussion of possible action to recommend approval to modify the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan scope of work. Brent.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. As you are aware, over many meetings, we have discussed the boundary expansion of CYMPO. And the executive board recently took an action that would confirm that we will be taking in basically the base map plus option B to the south and west and over to I-17 and up to I-40. That created a disparity in the scope of work that we had created for the RTP 2050. We did not scope that planning process, our major plan document, to include that area until the board took its official action. So this item and the backup that's in your packet basically outlines Kimley Horn's adjustment to the scope of work for the RTP 2050 in the amount of 70,000 and change. Yes, 70,875.76 to incorporate all that additional acreage, property, square miles, and also provide the same base analysis on the road network in those areas of the county. So basically, this will make our RTP process whole. When we get done with the RTP at the end of the next year, we'll have a document that also includes our new additional boundary area. So basically, we need an action today by the TAC to move that forward to the board to adopt that scope adjustment.
Okay. Any other questions on it before we? Yes, Ian.
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, where's the 70,000 coming from?
Allison.
We have available STDG dollars in our budget that we'll be pulling from in FY 24.
It'll fit within the budget.
70,000. What was the original cost of the? I'm just curious. It might be in here. Sorry.
Yeah, the original cost proposed 274,954.36. So obviously, those that proposed to our RTP process are aware of ahead of time what our budget is. They fit that number within the 275 we had allocated. So we're increasing the total budget for the RTP to 345,830.
Thank you.
All right, seeing none. The motion,
Make a motion, make sure I'm on the right item. Motion to recommend the executive board approve modifying the 2050 regional transportation plan scope of work as presented.
Second.
okay, motion been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Okay, aye carries. Thank you, Bryn.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 8. Review and discussion of possible action to recommend approval to amend the fiscal year 22 to 26 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program and amend the fiscal year 24-25 Unified Plan Work Program. Ms. Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This is the last amendment we're seeking for fiscal year 24. We're looking to close out some things to make some final adjustments to our budget and then move our excess funding over to fiscal year 25. So in your packets, you have each step-by-step modification that we're making. And then Dudley, if you could open the presentation. And here you'll see the various changes that we're making highlighted in yellow. We're updating our awards and apportionments, our operating budget, and making sure that we capture all of our unused fiscal year 24 funding, moving that to fiscal year 25. Then go back down one page. And then this is just fiscal year 25, doing the same things, adjusting our operations budget based on projections that we know now. Including, Frank, I think I told you fiscal year 24 for the RTP funding, it's fiscal year 25. So all of that's there. Going into all the details, I can answer any questions that anybody has. But that's the work program. And then if you go down one page. Those changes are reflected in our tip. And then lastly, go down one more page. Here we're including all of the awards that our human service providers within the region have received for ADOT. They're 5310 and 5311 transit dollars that we're required to include in our report annually. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Any questions for Allison? All right. Can I get a motion on this one?
I'd like to make this one, this is my favorite one. Make a motion to recommend the executive board to amend the FY 2024 Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWUP, and the FY 22 to 26 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, the MTIP, as presented.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion made in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Allison. We'll move on to item 9, regional development update. Michael.
Sure. Yes, because I put this there. I think Vinny was hoping, Vice Chairman, that I would share a little bit about the Regional Trails Initiative and some additional interesting information about regional transit. As many of you probably know, we're focusing on our regional conservation plan. And this is kind of the brainchild of Vinny and the town and city manager, county managers. One of the items that I'm focused on is the creation of a regional trails plan. The idea being that we should try to increase connectivity and pursue some serious goals with regional trails, whether it's connection and accessibility, user friendliness, safe and secure trail systems, and collaborative management while maintained. We have a meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, the 18th, with sort of some of the more technical people involved in trail planning. What we hope comes out of this looks a little bit like what's referenced on the page before, which is a Thurston Regional Planning Council regional trails plan. And so far, the feedback we received has been very positive from all the jurisdictions. I think this is one area where collaboration makes a ton of sense and isn't controversial. Do you have any questions about that?
Any questions? Yeah.
Okay, flipping the script to regional transit. The few slides I have here, we're going to focus a little bit on the expansion into Prescott and what it's meant so far. Some early results on the next page. Within the first 11 weeks of service, we had about 1,200 rides. No surprise, our average rider rating is really close to 5. It's 4.9. We've been able to bring down the operating cost associated with the cost per ride to under $20, which I think is a big deal. The on-time performance is at 96.2. And one thing that's not on this slide that I think is important to note, this was for the first 11 weeks. The ridership has gone up 20 to 25% in the subsequent weeks, which is about 3 to 4.
That's cool.
So all points lead to the success of this program in Prescott. These are the leading destinations. The VA and assorted VA offices is leading the pack. As you can see, Walmart, the Courthouse Plaza, and Safeway are coming up second, third, and fourth. We are very excited that we're getting veterans to appointments at the VA and the supporting offices. That was a need that we saw and a need that we are beginning to address. What else do we have on here? Here is kind of a ridership overview of both of the systems. I think this is a really dramatic statistic. Through a year and a half, the total rides now are over 42,000 from 9/20/22 to present. As many of you remember, the expectation for year one was 9,000. We blew that out of the water with 18. And now all indications are that the ridership just keeps growing and growing, which I think is great. There's an analysis of Prescott versus Prescott Valley. The lower numbers in the lighter yellow are the first year of Prescott. Prescott Valley started off a little bit quicker, but as I said, what we're seeing is 20 to 25% increases weekly in ridership in Prescott. And finally, this is really dramatic when you talk about trip purposes, that in Prescott Valley is still hovering around 40% of the people are getting to work by taking the system, 37%, and in Prescott it's about 20%. But from an economic impact perspective, I could make a very valid and true argument that every one of these categories is an economic impact. That whether you're getting people to the shopping center or a medical appointment or spending money in our recreation assets, the idea that this is just about getting vehicles off the road, to me, is missing half the point. You're getting a ton of people to produce and be part of our economic system around here that would otherwise not be available.
Correct.
Anybody have any comments or questions?
Couple of questions on the cost per ride. Do you remember, is the national average up in the 40s?
It is.
So that's
It's-
somewhat
Yeah,
phenomenal.
and everybody crunches their data a little bit different, so it's like sometimes it's apples and kumquats. We're taking the operating costs now, and the one thing is, since we now have the amount of vehicles we need and we're not buying more, it's literally the cost of the ride, i.e. the driver, the gas, mechanical requirements.
You're not depreciating those.
We are.
Oh, okay, that's what you do. Okay, and with some of the data, are you looking into the future? Would that, some of that information help decide whether or not you need to go with any fixed routes or anything?
Yeah, and we're also still exploring, Frank, the ability to try to partner with some of the other providers in the area that already are doing fixed routes like YRT. We have a meeting next week with YRT leadership in the county and the city of Chino to talk about what we need to do to make the next inroad in terms of having systems connectivity. And as some of you might know, we are also in negotiations for a mobility hub in Prescott, where you will be able to transfer from one system to the other. Well, if you need anything. Thanks, man.
Any other questions? All right. Good.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. All right, we'll move on to item 10, planning project updates. Jan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Committee, quick verbal update on the SR 69 corridor master plan. I think most of you are aware that the protraction of Sundog toward the end got us a little off schedule with the 69 corridor master plan. We continue to work on getting the schedule right again. We're working on a balance of what's left. The technical teams at Kittleson and AECom have been working hard developing potential mitigations and alternatives for some of the more problematic parts of the corridor. We've had preliminary meetings with Andy and Anthony at ADOT to discuss some of those strategies, and they are very creative and very not ever seen here before. So there's a lot to talk about. I did a preliminary outreach this morning to both PV and Prescott, whose sections of the roadway would be most impacted by those proposals. And we're working on getting a meeting with each of the jurisdictions set up with the technical team also in attendance to talk about those possible solutions. Pretty exciting. We'll head toward a larger public meeting in the early fall. We do expect to wrap the plan up by mid to late fall. Another piece of the outreach that we have decided to pursue, it wasn't originally scoped this way, but we're going to make a slight modification, is to really do intentional outreach to all of the 69 facing businesses. And that's the entire length of the corridor, 17.5 miles from Dewey Humboldt to Prescott. We are in the process of working with MAG on their employment database to identify all of those operators, because we can't really go to ownership data. A lot of that's LLC and organizational ownership that doesn't have anything to do with the ops on the ground. So we're looking to talk to businesses, do targeted outreach, especially when we start contemplating these more creative mitigations along the corridor that are most impacted, that businesses would be most impacted by. So we want them to really be in the conversation when we start looking at some of those more creative solutions. It might take a minute to get the community comfortable with some of these concepts, but we really do see some of these opportunities as a way forward to reduce congestion and really help to alleviate the conditions. So more to follow on that. And again, 1,400 plus survey responses on the SR 69 corridor master plan. Contrast that with 226 on ACT UP.
Yeah.
Which makes me a little sad. But I guess there's a lot to talk about when people are in pain on the roadway as opposed to wanting to get on your bike and take a ride. So contrast and compare. We will swing back to you all with another ACT UP update at our next TAC soiree. But with that, if anybody has any questions on the 69 process, I'm happy to take those.
Any questions?
Got one.
All right, go ahead.
So with like ongoing development that may be occurring right now, you know, you drive down 69 and you can see stuff happening near Costco where people are going to be accessing 69. And I think there's maybe some development near the Maverick and PV that may be occurring. Is that being considered as part of this study and as future impacts that may be changing, you know, if access management is part of that? You know, I don't know if those are being communicated to the consultant as far as things they may need to know.
Yeah, great question, Roger. I recently reached back out to both the town and city development teams to reconfirm what we know is on the ground or what is in the pipeline. And yes, we had several multifamily projects in the Prescott area that will put hundreds more cars on SR 69 that have since gone through preliminary approval processes. So we supplemented all of that data to Kittleson and AECom as part of their analysis. Same thing in the Prescott Valley to Dewey part of the corridor where there's a lot of building activity and there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline along there as well. We are continuing to update those numbers for the technical team so that they understand the impacts that we're facing.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Brent. Leslie?
Thank you, Vice Chair. So I have Donna with Stanley Consultant with us today. She's going to give an update of our recent RSA that we just completed. It was a 8-mile corridor from the intersection of Robert Road and Fain Road to the base of Mingus Mountain. We finalized that at the end of May, so she's just going to give us a quick 15-minute presentation on the findings.
Hello, Donna.
Hi, can you hear me, everybody?
Yes, loud and clear.
I didn't get a chance to check that before I logged in, so I wanted to make sure. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the presentation. And it should be there, yes?
Yep.
Okay. So as she said, this was a road safety assessment that Stanley Consultants completed on SR 89A. And the project participants, the roadway owner is of course ADOT. The requester of the RSA was CYMPO. And your RSA team was Marta Gerber, who was the team leader. She apologizes that she is out of the country and couldn't present today. And then myself, Leslie, Mike Kuzel, who is a human factors expert, Jeremy Martin with the Town of Prescott Valley Police Department, Stephen Strong with the Department of Public Safety, Cody Rose with the Chief of Planning and Logistics for the Arizona Fire and Medical Authority. I had to make that one really long. And then Parker Murphy with the Town of Prescott Valley. Many, many thanks to the folks here. They had invaluable information for us. It was really a pleasure to work with them. So we appreciated their involvement for sure. So when we looked at this, we broke it into two sections. We did separate analyses for the intersection and then the corridor because the crash types were just so different. We wanted to be sure that we were looking at things without sort of commingling and having things separated out for you. So this is the intersection that we were looking at. This is 89A and the corridor goes on up this way to the northeast. And then this is the entire corridor starting down here at that intersection we just looked at all the way up to the corridor end, which is just past that cattle guard up there. And then we looked at the residential land use along the corridor because it looks like you've got quite a few houses and housing tracts that are going to be coming in along this area, which is going to increase the number of cars as well as the time of day usage and things along the area. So we wanted to have a fair idea of where those were going in and what the usage was. We held the startup information meeting briefing, just asking really what was the purpose of this? Why did it come up on your radar? What are the things that you are seeing out there now that seem dangerous or are causing crashes? And this is a list of really what we learned. Mostly it was about the high speeds coming down off of Mingus Mountain out of those switchbacks, and that the lack of passing lanes coupled with slow vehicles and maybe tourists coming out of that area leads to frustration and maybe some unsafe passing. Much of the corridor not having shoulders and the edge of pavement drop off, recovering from a lane departure was challenging. One of the other things that we found is that there were 3 prior RSAs in the area. So ADOT looked at the intersection back in 2021 and 2022. Town of Prescott Valley asked ADOT to lead one on the intersection itself. And the entire RSA was looked at in an internal ADOT RSA, literally right before we did ours. So you can see a quick summary of those prior RSAs in the full report if you're interested. So talking about just the intersection now, here's the annual average daily traffic volumes that we were seeing. So not too high yet, but like I said, you're going to see a lot more starting to come in on this corridor once those housing developments get built up. And your turning movements, again, are not terribly high in that area as of yet. Crash history from July 2018 to June 2023, which was the most recent 5 years that we had, there were a total of 35 crashes that we attributed to the intersection itself. And what we saw was there was 1 fatal injury, 3 serious injuries right there, no pedestrian or bicyclist incidents, and that 80% of the crashes occurred in daylight conditions. The types of crashes, 51% are rear end crashes, 77% if you include angle and rear end crash incidents right there, 23 were disregarded traffic signals, and almost half of the crashes were traveling at a speed too fast for current conditions. I don't think this was a shock to anyone out there who was doing the RSA with us. And then looking at the corridor, there's your ADT for the corridor area right up there. There were a total of 46 crashes in that same time period. You can see they're fairly well spread out with a small concentration here of people, probably coming off of those switchbacks there. Of those 46 crashes, there were 4 fatal injuries and 4 serious injuries. Again, no pedestrian or bicyclist incidents. 61% of those crashes occurred in daylight conditions, so slightly less. That tells you something's happening out there. The lighting was good for the area, but it's still very rural lighting, so it's not like a very well lit roadway there. 72% were single vehicle and left turn incidents. 41% occurred with no improper action. That makes me a little suspicious. But they weren't able to determine what was the improper action there, at least. And then 20% of crashes were, again, traveling too fast for current conditions. And that's a nice lowish number to see. So that was actually a little bit good. 19 crashes. This is a 10-year crash map, by the way, because we didn't have any pedestrian and bicyclist crashes in there. We went back 10 years and we actually did a comparison. The crash types didn't change very much when you looked at between 10 years and 5 years. But if you want to see what those comparisons are, there's a pretty detailed analysis in the report looking at the 2 of them. But we did go back and I wanted to show you this. The crashes look very similarly distributed to that 5-year crash map. There were 2 pedestrian and 1 bicycle crash incidents in the prior 5 years. So, yeah, was that a question?
Nope.
What we saw when we were out there. So we just wanted to give you an idea of some of the road users that we saw out there. Lots of these heavy duty trucks coming out. I guess there's a plant out there. So we saw quite a few of these. We did see a bicyclist, and then we saw 2 more because both Mike and I rode the corridor. But he was out there kind of mixing it up with traffic all by himself. And then we've got this strange little train of prime trucks that we thought was kind of fun. Lots of good practices going on out there, right? There's good line of sight for all turning movements, with one exception, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We like the use of the flex delineators on the curves. There was good lighting at the minor intersections all along the corridor, which was really nice. The chevrons on most of the curves, they were there. Signal timing seems like it's working and the signal heads are in good condition. The signs in the corridor are all reflective and not in poor condition at all. And most of the sign placement is appropriate to what's coming up. So we did use a safe system approach when we were looking at these. So we tried to make sure that we were approaching this from this safe system approach. And if you haven't heard of this, it's probably worth going and looking it up. But basically, it seeks safety through vehicle and roadway design and operational changes, rather than relying primarily on behavioral changes. What we found is we can tell people to slow down all we want. We can put up all the signs we want. We can put police out there. And we're still not seeing behavioral changes. So we're trying to change the environment so that those slower speeds that we want are supported, so that the behaviors that we want to see are inherent in the roadway and the obvious way to do things. It seeks to fully integrate the needs of all users. So not just looking at vehicles out there, but also making sure that we're considering pedestrians and bicyclists, that we're considering the needs of older drivers, younger drivers, non-drivers, the disabled, and everyone else who needs to use the transportation system. And then we also recognize that users make mistakes and they make bad decisions. And we can usually anticipate what those bad decisions and mistakes are going to be. And what we want to do is reduce the opportunities for those bad decisions. And if they occur, we want to make sure that they don't result in a fatal or serious injury to the driver. We want to reduce the seriousness of making those mistakes. So looking at that, here's what we came up with. Again, breaking it into intersection and corridor. You don't have reflective signal head back plates. There were quite a few of those crashes were ignoring or going against traffic signal. Might have been because they weren't easily seen. This is something that could help, and it's very simple mitigation effort. The approaches on westbound Fane Road and eastbound 89A are really, really wide, and the medians to them end well before the intersection. So what we suggest is really hardening and bringing those all the way up to the intersection so that it visually narrows the corridor as you come into the intersection, rather than right now, the road seems to get very wide at those intersections, and wider the road, the more it encourages speed. The intersection approaches on westbound 89A and northbound Robert Road are a little bit skewed, and the only place we really saw that as a problem is that on the southbound approach, the through travel lane on the northbound approach can be completely obscured by the driver's side A-pillar. We couldn't see who was there at all. I know that the intersection was skewed a little bit. Realigning that intersection would be a costly but very effective countermeasure to that. The slip lane from the westbound to the northbound, the sight line is really poor. If you are trying to make that merge, you don't realize as you go around that corner that the merge happens very quickly. You don't have an acceleration lane or a merging lane. And you cannot really see northbound vehicles that are coming up from the southbound entrance because of vehicles that are sitting at the stoplight. So you can't really see around them. You can see the set to pull out really far in order to try and see back to when they can merge. So we have our short-term recommendation is really to extend this merge lane to the north as far as you possibly can, move the stop bar on Fane Road back so that you increase the sightline distance there, and then add shark teeth to this merge point so that people are really clear that they're going to merge right there. The long-term recommendation would be to completely realign that right-hand turn and pull it away, make a true acceleration and merge lane out of it. We saw a lot of this. Drivers using their shoulder on the northbound approach to make right turn lanes. There's plenty of room there. Just restripe the road to create a dedicated right-hand turn lane, and that will solve that problem.
Yep.
Due to the skew, the northbound left and through lanes don't line up. This would probably be a place for the skip striping just to show drivers where exactly in the roadway they're moving. When we looked at the corridor, we broke the corridor again into two different areas. The first thing we wanted to do is looking at these single vehicle and lane departure crashes that you have. That was the major problem that we saw in the crashes, and we wanted to address those separately. So one of the problem is the pavement is really in very poor condition along a lot of the corridor. That makes handling a little bit better and controlling the vehicle a little tougher. And the recommendation is to really repair the pavement. The issue is excessive speed, which we did see in some of those. So consider narrowing the lanes. Again, the narrower the lanes, the slower that people naturally drive, and adding center line rumble strips so that you have to keep the car in the lane, which makes you slow down just a little bit or you get corrected. Additional speed limit signs may help, and an increased enforcement. That's of course dependent on whether enforcement has the capacity to increase out there. There's inconsistent shoulder width throughout the corridor, making breakdown lanes and things like that a little bit difficult. It would be good to go through and just make sure that the shoulder width is consistent and according to ADOT standards. We saw a lot of faded pavement marking. It really just needs to be restriped, and we do suggest a 6-inch edge line stripe to really delineate the roadway. The shoulder delineators, we really liked that we're there, but they're a little bit inconsistent throughout the corridor. So probably going through, repairing and replacing the damaged ones and making sure that all of them are consistently used would be useful out there. The slopes on either side of the roadway appear steeper in some of the sections that are typical. So it's probably worth it to go through and assess the slopes for compliance with ADOT standards. And that's different than the safety edge, which has eroded. It was there, and that's a really important countermeasure, but it is eroding and becoming a little bit too steep to be a safety edge. So the whole corridor should be gone through, assessed, and rebuilt. So the curves, and when we talked about delineation here, we are talking about the chevrons. In the daylight, these are not really very noticeable. So we suggest just going through and evaluating the curves to see if they meet the standards for an enhanced delineation, larger signs, closer together, wider shoulders. And then make some careful decisions. They may not meet those minimums, but if engineering judgment is there that we want to make sure that these are a little bit more visible, those could be put in. And then we're looking at the multi-vehicle crashes through the corridor and the recommendations there. So the speeding and unsafe passing, you can see we have lots of videos of people passing us as we were driving the corridor at the speed limit in areas where it's not passing. And then this picture on the right, that's not an illegal pass, but it is two larger slow-moving vehicles trying to pass each other, which takes a fairly long time to get around sometimes. And the longer that vehicle is over there in the left-hand lane, the less time they may have to recover if something happens. So consider adding safety pullouts so that if you're a slower driver, you can easily get out of the roadway and let people pass. Increasing the speed limit, the number of speed limit signs throughout the corridor and enforcement. But I think the safety pullouts are probably going to be the most useful of those. We noticed that the right turn storage might be inadequate in some locations, and that might particularly become more of a problem as that area gets built out with more homes. So you might want to go through and evaluate the right turn storage and transitions and installing a right turn lane at the new development. And then, because I'm a cyclist myself and we look at all road users in the safe system approach, we did ride the corridor and we have some recommendations for you. That's me and Mike. So there's no pedestrian facilities or bicycle facilities at the intersection or through the corridor. And we did see one very brave cyclist out there without a helmet going through the corridor. He was coming southbound and heading into town, going straight across that intersection. So you're going to see more people who want to do that. The more people who live out there, the more people are going to want to come into town some other way besides using a vehicle. The shoulders are not always there. When they're there, they're not always rideable. They're not always wide enough. The rumble strips, I got caught on the wrong side of the rumble strips and could not get back over for several miles in one instance. And they are not the new standard of bike safe rumble strips. And then high speeds just make this a stressful, difficult corridor to walk through. There are no ADA accommodations at all. There's enough room along the northwest side of that roadway to put a shared use path. That would be the preferred recommendation. It would get people away from fast moving cars, both on bicycles. It would allow for ADA accommodations and people walking to get into town. There's a great little pathway system right in town if you could only get to it. So I think as people move out there and that gets built up with residential, you'll have a lot more people wanting to do that to get into town to reach that other pathway system. Less preferred and probably a little bit easier would be to go back. We already made this suggestion for safety is to make sure that consistent shoulders are throughout the corridor with a 6-foot minimum because of the speeds out there. Putting the bike safe rumble strips on the edge line. So the inside of that, the bicyclists would be separated from the traffic with that rumble strip, but still leaving them a 5-foot shoulder. And then installing the new state law 3-foot minimum clearance to pass would probably be a really good reminder out there for vehicles that they might see some bicyclists out there and that they do need to wait until it's safe and give them room to pass. We were passed several times very closely in areas where there was no particular need to stay that close. It wasn't like there was 2 vehicles passing or anything else. So a reminder that they do need to give bicyclists safety would be a useful thing out in that corner. So when we were going through this, I just want to call your attention to the Safe System Roadway Design Hierarchy. This is a publication that just came out last year. And what it is it's trying to give, it's a tool that characterizes engineering and infrastructure-based countermeasures and strategies and relates them to the alignment with the safe system approach. And the purpose is really to just help transportation agencies and engineers identify and prioritize countermeasures and strategies when they're developing these transportation projects. The 4 tiers here, they are in order of alignment with the safe system approach. So if you can remove severe conflicts, that's your number 1 go-to. If you can't do anything to remove the severe conflicts, then try and reduce the vehicle speeds through the corridor. If you can't reduce the vehicle speeds, or in addition to these, you also want to manage conflicts in time. And then in your last tier, your bottom tier of least effective, is to increase attentiveness and awareness. And so we have gone through, and these are the proven safety countermeasures that we suggested in the roadway. And you can see where they line up with the different tiers in that. We didn't give you any managed conflicts in time. That's usually something like leading pedestrian intervals and things like that, which are not useful in this corridor. But you can see how these line up with those tiers in that. Questions, comments?
Yes.
So just want to be clear, doesn't look like it warrants a grade separation from what you studied or anything like that?
For pedestrians and bicyclists, or the grade separation for vehicles?
For vehicles.
That's a very, very, very costly countermeasure. And for the AADT that's out there, I think it could be mitigated without doing that.
All right, Ian?
Yeah, I had a question. When I drive that intersection and when you see some of the photos, and most of us have been out there, that intersection has some of the largest distances across it between where the vehicles, you know, are sitting at stop bars and stuff and indications. Did you guys, when you do these RSAs, do you ever look at those distances in regard to the MUTCD? And there's maximum distances for like placement of signal equipment. I was just curious because you mentioned back plates and things like that. But did you, or I would just recommend that you look at those sorts of things too. Because some of these distances might be 150 to 170 feet between the driver and the indications. So yeah, they're really far.
So to the signals?
Yes.
Yeah,
Because
we didn't do that for this one. It didn't seem on obvious glance to us that the signal heads that were out there were too small.
Yeah.
It's probably on the cusp of what you're saying to require larger signals, but before I went through and did that, I would just try getting those retroreflective backplates up to see if that does enough to bring people's attention to it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
In the morning, it's just the 6 cars for the light changes, that's all.
Yeah. Whole thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll move indications to backsides of other locations to get it closer. I mean, there's things you can do, so that's all.
Yeah, and you can put, you know, secondary ones on this side of the intersection and everything else. I would say that just given the fact that there's not a lot of other stuff going on, you can probably call attention to it with the retroreflectives. And then if that isn't mitigating it enough, you know, move to the larger sizes. The other thing that we did, part of it will help with that, and I know this is going to sound counterintuitive, but bringing those just narrowing those corridors by hardening those medians and bringing them up will somehow that makes it seem shorter. I know that sounds really stupid, but you come up to an intersection that has sort of a more congested feel and you're going slower, so you're more likely to be able to see those.
Another question I have on the medians where they painted them at the intersection that you're recommending extending the hard medians. Was that maybe a standard in the past that they did for a reason, or do you know what the reason typically would be behind that?
I cannot tell you. It's you know, it might have just simply been that this was a pretty rural area when it was built. And it's now just starting to get sort of more attention and more urbanized feel with it. I have no idea for that. It makes for a huge intersection. And if you do, like I said,
I can give you one reason.
Cost?
Because that's a depressed median out there. There was no way to get drainage out of it. Once you brought the depressed median so far up to the stop bars.
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of things that we don't consider.
I would think people would.
Yeah, so,
So in order to harden the median in this case, you probably have to do a raised median in those areas where that as opposed to a depressed median. And then in
yeah,
order
it's,
to make the drainage.
yeah, you're absolutely right. That's not gonna be, it's not gonna be a simple low cost. That's gonna be a design and mitigation that goes through there. But I really think that it's gonna be one of the bigger ones to just narrow the whole feel of that intersection. Like I said, right now, when you come up to that intersection, it gets wider and that encourages people to speed up. Whereas you want to sort of narrow the visual field as people come up to the intersection. So it's one that would make probably one of the larger differences, but you're right. It's not just going to be a simple go out and build some curbs. The other thing I wanted to bring up in this area is they did talk about that school that's going to go in just south. I guess the buildings are there, they're converting it. It's going to be open for a school year. And that is going to change the flavor and drivers and use of that intersection. And then particularly as, again, I keep mentioning that the housing that's being built up there, those houses are gonna bring people right through that intersection and go into that school. So it's just something to keep an eye on in the future as that school opens up and you see how that affects the area.
Yeah, that school will take place August 2nd.
Oh, coming up that close.
Yes.
With the new middle school site.
Yep.
Yeah, and middle school, that's even more interesting because that's on the cusp of, you know, parents maybe letting their kids ride their bikes to school or walk to school in groups and things like that. So just like I said, it's something to definitely keep an eye on and see how it changes the mix of use in that area and maybe additional countermeasures.
One of the biggest that I've seen is coming off of Robert Road and making the right onto Main Road where it's not a lane, but everybody uses as a right turn lane. It definitely gets used as a right turn lane and that's not a turn lane.
Yeah.
Your picture.
It's wide enough. It's wide enough to restripe.
Yes. And that would be an easy fix.
That's a pretty simple one, yeah.
So, all right. Any other questions? All right, I appreciate that presentation. You have anything else or you're good?
All right, no, I didn't have anything else for you. I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to answer questions. We have turned in the final report to CYMPO, and that's been turned over. I don't know if the next phase is, I think it's been turned over to ADOT and they get to make a formal response to it. And they can combine it. Like I said, they just completed one of their own. And I know that a lot of our recommendations mirrored the recommendations that they have in there too, so.
Is that on CYMPO's website to view? It's not yet. Can you send me a copy? Yeah, I can send, I thought I did. I sent the draft over to you and then the final one just came out. So I sent it to ADOT this morning, but I could send that to you as well. I might have. I can go back and look. Yeah, no, I haven't sent the final. I sent the draft to the group, but the final one I hadn't sent to the whole group. I'll send that over to you guys. And just an FYI, we did send over the draft report to Mike Blankenship, who is doing the HSIP. So for SR 89A, the rumble strips, the safety edges, and the restriping edge lines will be added to the HSIP application.
Oh, excellent. That we were wondering what was going to be useful to him there. That's a great.
Yeah, so at least that's something. So we'll continue to work with ADOT and the town to see what else we can do to assist.
Maybe the right turn lane going north.
I think that would be a good start. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
You're welcome. I sent the PDF of that presentation out. You can feel free to distribute that as well if that would help.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Is there anything else on this one, Leslie?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing that's good, we're gonna move on to item 11, which is the roundtable agency updates. Prescott.
So the city is taking our IGA for our transportation alternatives. We're a little behind. We've had some issues with the IGA and the indemnity agreements within it, but we're going on June 25th. So we're still moving forward on that. That's for our SR 89 multi-use path up by Deepwell, the roundabout. So we're on track with that. I also have the SS4A grant. We've been working, that's an FHWA managed project. That's for a vulnerable user study. It's focused on multimodal users in the Dexter, kind of the neighborhood south of the hospital, and then, but that whole corridor. So we're working on the IGA with them. That they have a different time frame than ADOT, so we're probably going to be back in like October, going to council for that. Along the lines of that HSIP stuff, obviously we're all waiting to hear, on awards and things, but we did do one with green light, and ours was an intersection safety improvement project, and it did have backplates and striping and stuff. So I don't know if that'll be looked at as well, but I just figured I'd comment on that. Our PLP and Sundog intersection projects pretty much 99% done. We're missing some signs and stuff, but the signal's operating there. It's good. And then we've obviously done Willow Creek Road. If you drive through Prescott, you know that was a pain in the butt for a while. And then I think we're doing Iron Springs Road and Gail Gardner. We're doing an improvement at night right now over there. But that's all I had.
All right.
Yep.
And Prescott Valley.
So Glassford Hill expansion widening is about 60%. We're at 60% design phase. We're currently reviewing the plans internally. We'll have our second public meeting the end of July, and then hopefully wrap up the plans by fall, and put it out to bid. We won't start construction until after the holidays. We don't want to mess up our main retail corridor in that area again. The TA shared use path, we did complete our IGA with ADOT mid-May. I talked to ADOT earlier this week. I'm just waiting on ADOT to finish up their scope of work draft and RFQ. And then they will put that out, and then hopefully we'll get someone on board by late summer, early fall for that. And there's a lot of other projects, but that's all our plans.
All right. Jim Mille.
Yeah, the TA Peavine Trail, IGA council actually approved that last night. So we already got that to Julie over at ADOT, and she's processing that. So that should go through. Just a reminder, the scope of that only for 30% design and clearances. So we hope to get a good cost estimate on that. If there's money left over after one of their on-calls to it, Julie said we might be able to amend that IGA to more design with the grant we've got now. But for now, we want to at least get a good preliminary design, and then the next grant cycle, we'll have some good cost estimates to apply for final design and construction. That's what we hope to do there. But it's a little slow taking off, but it's moving forward now, and we're hoping to get it going. And on a local project, I want to thank Prescott. We needed some easements on Road 1 East because evidently they owned it to the middle of the road. They were kind enough to say, we don't want it. So we've got some temporary easements where we can move some fences and get that one of those main corridors done. And we'll work on the full-blown right-of-way dedication and transfer as we move on. But I appreciate their cooperation. That way we can get that road built in front of the school during the summer before school starts.
Can I jump back real
Yes.
quick?
Yes.
To this meeting, this past Monday, our planning and zoning committee approved Lakeshore 650 annexation from the county. It's gonna go to council in August, and for the first read and second read in September. 3,500 homes plus huge retail area at Fane Road and Lakeshore. We fully suspect that the community will come out possibly with a referendum to try to make it go to a vote. But right now, as of right now, it's moving forward.
Got water?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right
the
there by
Fanes
the
have,
Cedar Creek.
well, the Fanes have grazing cattle, right, water, and it's a Fane project.
So was the council's action limited to the annexation itself?
Planning and zoning
Planning and zoning, sorry.
was limited to the annexation. So when it goes to council, it'll be for the development agreement, the master plan, and the rezoning. So it'll be all together as a package.
That will happen at the council level after the primary.
Just August.
We don't meet in July. We don't have meetings in July,
Oh, okay.
council meetings,
Oh, cool. Know that.
holiday.
Yeah, we have. The Prescott's doing that too. Maybe that's off of your model. So that's nice. They're taking a break too through August,
We have.
July, August.
All right. Andy will touch on the project for Dewey Humble. Other than that, we don't have anything going, so we will move on from item 11 to 12 to the federal state updates. ADOT Northwest District. Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. ADOT tentative 2025-2029 5-year construction plan. Public review and comment period ended May 24th, and we're expecting adoption at the June 21st State Transportation Board meeting. I-17 at 169 TI project, we back up on that on 5/20. Hopefully get that completed in the next couple of months. The Paulden to Ash Fork Centerline Rumble Strip project complete. All finished with that. Ash Fork Creek Bridges, scour retrofits and upgrades. Right now, they completed all the scour floor underneath the I-17 bridges or the I-40 bridges, and working on the inlet and outlet on the Lewis Avenue Fox Culvert conglomeration there right now. Grant Woods Parkway to I-17 Centerline Rumble Strip project. Actually, our partnering meeting for that project will be tomorrow. And so shortly after that, we'll have a contractor schedule on that one. Prescott Lakes Parkway to Heather Heights, 69. Partnering meeting scheduled right now for June 28th. And then probably with fans concurrence, they'll probably start that work after July 4th holiday. Old Highway 66 on Fort Rock Road. HSIP project for the county. Asphalt paving and supply was awarded that one, and our partnering meeting is anticipated somewhere around the 19th of June right now. So that's what we're looking at. And we'll get a schedule from them after that. For some things in design, 89 at Little Ranch Road. The basically 100% plans stage is complete, and expecting a bid advertisement here yet in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 24. 89 from post 331 to 335 center line edge line rumble strips, basically 5 north up to depot 89. Advertise anticipated here in fourth quarter of fiscal year 24. Fane Road from Robert Road to Links Creek Bridge, AC spot repair and microsurface. Hoping for that to go out here in fourth quarter of fiscal year 24 to bid. 89 to 89A TI on ramp. The stage 4 95% design is complete, and then pretty much waiting on construction money for that project. 69 and 169 roundabout. They're working on the stage 4 95% design right now. On I-17 Sunset Point to I-40. This is a ITS project for wrong way detection, cameras, variable message boards, and road weather information systems. I'm anticipating to go to bid on that one in second quarter of fiscal year 25. And then we've got the HSIP on 69 from in front of Costco for the 3rd lane extension and the raised median, anticipating going to bid third quarter of fiscal year 25 on that. And then one that we're working on right now is a kind of a modified design build contract. It's a I-17 and I-40 truck parking. Some of the first expansions are going to be Sunset Point Rest Area. And then we've got some ones on I-40 as well in our district going. It's an interesting Yeah, you need to get it off of our ramps. That's the problem. And that's my report.
All right. Any questions for Andy?
Are we find more funding for the roundabout? Or are we still for construction?
What?
Funding for the
Construction
construction?
funding is still
Funding?
not complete.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
We'll be able to complete the design right now.
I was just wondering on timing.
What's the, latest cost estimate?
I don't have that.
Do that?
Nope, I don't have that right now.
That one and that.
We'll still spend.
Double on ramps.
Double on ramps.
Both.
Well,
Yep.
just every day,
Both.
it goes,
Yep.
keeps going up.
Okay, ADOT Multimodal Planning Division update, Ruth Garcia.
Hi, thank you, Vice Chair and members of the TAC. I do think that some of my items were already addressed, so I will keep this short. I'll start off with just some personnel changes that are occurring or ongoing throughout MPD. As some of you may know, Mr. Paul Patney will no longer be the MPD director. He has accepted the Southwest District Administrator position. However, in the interim of filling his MPD director position, he will still be wearing both hats. So I did just want to give that information for that. I know it was already touched on, the 5-year construction program is out and expected to be adopted at the next State Transportation Board meeting on June 21st. For our TA program, as mentioned, for the Prescott Valley Shared Use Path, as it is an ADOT project, it has been executed and the IGA has been executed. We're working on getting this through our contracts and procurement to hopefully send it out for RFP at the end of July, early August is the expected time frame. For our HSAP call for projects, the initial ranking did occur at the end of May, and the projects were sent to ADOT's Projects Review Board sometime this week. But if you have any questions, please continue to contact Mona Algen-Swick or Larry Talley with our HSIP group. Moving on, for our electric vehicle infrastructure plan, the anticipated awards are expected to come out in early summer of this year, and we're aiming to release another RFP for the next round at the end of the year. And then for our statewide ITS architecture update, it has been completed and we are working on getting the final deliverables on ADOT's website. But that is the whole of my report, and I'm open to any questions.
Have any questions? Ruth? Ruth, thank you for that update.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to C, FHWA update. Dan Gabio. Oh, okay. Gabio. Okay, we'll move on from that one. So we are to the end of our meeting and it's 2:38, so we're gonna adjourn.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yep, sorry.
just to doesn't need to be on the record necessarily, but we were remiss at the top of the meeting to in not introducing Amanda Hart,
Okay,
who is a new planner with CYMPO. She is currently in a temporary status helping us while Leslie goes on maternity leave. Comes to us by way of the ASU Urban Planning Program and has recently been interning at Yavapai County Development Services. So we've recently hired her over to CYMPO. And we're super happy to have her here. So please welcome. Happy to be here.
great to see you on the team, so thank you so much. Thank you. All right, with that, we will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.